The Florida Gators lost 2 commitments this past weekend. There's rumors of more. We've got Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, here to actually calm you down for a little bit. We'll talk about that here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business or SEC program. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. And now joining me is going to be Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, which hurts the soul to say right now. But LinkedIn is the college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And we're going to start with the bad news because, well, you're an idiot not to. But Florida this weekend, on top of losing the game, on top of having a 50 bomb dropped on you, on top of giving up 700 yards with 606 of them coming from the quarterback of LSU, which, by the way, when he came to LSU, I slandered him horrendously. So it's just that's a rough one. I was not a fan of him at Arizona State. And then now, of course, Saturday you lose Jamonta Waller to Auburn. Sunday you lose Wardell Mack to Texas. Monday we get a Nasir Johnson crystal ball to Georgia. So, Brian, what do you make of the Florida Gators 2024 recruiting situation right now?
They still have a really good class, but they're going to lose some guys and there's going to be a lot of movement. If you're a person that needs structure, that needs consistency in your life, you're good. Just turn off the Florida Gators, come back and see us in 2024 during spring practice. There will not be any ramifications. But if you're one of those people, much like Brandon, who's a narcissistic kind of person and in a different way, because he just wants to beat his head on a wall.
Yep, that's it. I hate myself.
And I mean, in all honesty, it's partially because of how they're playing on the field, but they're going after kids that are dudes. You and I talked about this for a while. When they got that string of D linemen and they had that recruiting run, I think it was June or early July, I can't remember, but we were like, man, this is incredible. They went head-to-head with Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, all these schools. Well, it's not a rule that those schools have to suddenly stop recruiting the prospect. And to that point, here's the other side. Florida's trying to do the same thing with some kids from other schools. So this is not a one-sided deal. Dalen Evans and some other kids we will discuss momentarily. Look, I told a friend of mine recently who hates the whole end game in recruiting, how the kids flip around. I said, conservatively, especially down south, 3 kids a year, you're going to gain and lose during the season. And he's all, I can't say the things he was saying about that because we're on the air. But I'm like, look, that's the era we're in. If you don't want to follow recruiting, don't follow. But that's how this works. But, you can use your imagination. There is no loyalty like there used to be, and these coaches are changing. The Jimbo situation, the kids that and their parents, like, I'm supposed to send my kid to College Station, but now we don't know who the head coach is going to be. Every one of those kids has talked to somebody. Do you blame them? And that's just what's going on in college football. So I think Florida is in a unique spot, but they got there because they went out of the realm and got kids they hadn't been getting in the last few years. Everybody that's a Gator fan that I know was about a certain Dan Mullen because he didn't recruit. I don't know a single person that follows it that's a Gator fan that wasn't mad at him about it. Well, this coach did, but there's going to be some ramifications. Kirby Smart loses kids like this too. You're going to lose kids. Nick Saban loses kids like this too. It's a part of the process, especially in that top 100 tier. Man, it's all over the place. Let's see where the chips fall on National Signing Day and even a day or two later, because I wouldn't be surprised with how some of these are going if it went past. Just throwing that out there, just to make Brandon's day a little better. He might have to suffer a little longer. So that's where it's at.
Hey, I will tell you this. I am shocked that you were the voice of reason here for Florida. I feel like normally every week you're on the show and Florida Gators fans are like, oh, hey, me. And then now you're just like, no, like this happens. Don't worry.
That's the way it is.
Don't worry. And so that's how things work. But I am curious also because we talked about this during the summer when it was like mid-June, early July. Yeah. Florida went on that big recruiting run. They got Jamonte Waller, Wardell Mack was a bit later, but they went on that big recruiting run. And we talked about being out of state and the approach where Florida went more out of state in this cycle than they really have just in general before. Does that play a part in it where you can't take unofficials whenever you want to campus like Miles Graham can? You're not constantly seeing the team, like you're not getting the most recent news from them constantly, where I talked about it yesterday on my show. We talked about it off air, where if you're not in the Florida Gators circles, you see Florida lose a lot, whether it's on the recruiting trail, no matter what it is, you see Florida lose a lot. Does going out of state for so much of the class play an impact in that?
Well, let's look at it this way. You and I were talking about Raymond Cottrell before this show started. It's a kid that I know that's from Pensacola, was committed to Florida at one point. He commits to A&M. The coach gets fired. He decommits. He's more committed to the staff than he is A&M. Did he have any loyalty to A&M? No. He just wanted to go to school there because of the football situation. But if you grew up a Gator fan, a Knoll fan, Georgia, whatever, and you like grew up within an hour of a campus, 2 hours, it's different. You will see, regardless of sport, it could be women's gymnastics. There's a coaching change. The person is more likely to stick if they're from that area. There's a loyalty to it. There's a heritage to it, and it's part of the culture. But if you're 2-3 states away, well, then we got a different deal. So Florida's losing a little bit of that, but they also needed defensive linemen in this class. And while Florida always has D linemen, a lot of the massive kids, like they're trying to get bigger, they're not here in this cycle. It's just, it's random. And they went out, like the kid from North Carolina that we'll talk about in a second. I'll take him as soon as any D tackle in the country. He's got, out of all the D tackles I've seen this year, I think he has the highest ceiling. Like he is nasty because he's a pure pass rusher. Like NFL wants that guy. There might be some that are better in other ways, but like as a pass rusher upside, I'll take that kid. But you didn't get him in your state, so Ohio State's recruiting him. I'm sure Georgia and Virginia, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, everybody else recruiting him too. That's part of it. If you're going to play big boys in the SEC, you got to play against the big boys in recruiting too, and you're going to lose some of those battles.
We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I, and we get fired up on wins and losses, both on the field and recruiting, who starts, who sits, which we will talk about tomorrow. I'm thankful for that connection that we have. And today I want our chat to be just a little bit more personal. So whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend. Thanks to our partners at Jace Medical. Life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. Even ED generics for Cialis and Viagra prescriptions. Go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code Locked On at checkout for a discount as well. So if you or someone you love would get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. And remember to use promo code Locked On for $20 off your purchase. Yeah, I feel like for Florida right now, it's just like, I just need a little bit of stabilization here, where we spent so much of the early season going, yes, on-field product matters. Not necessarily. I don't think necessarily that wins or losses matter as much as the actual product that you're putting on the field.
Yeah, it's got to look something rather.
Yeah, as a defensive player, can I blame you? Like Jamonte Waller watching Princely Umanmielen, who I tweet the numbers every week because he's always at the top. But Princely Umanmielen right now leads all qualifying pass rushers in like pass rush win rate. Jamonte Waller going to fill that same jack spot. Austin Armstrong dropped Princely back to straight up off ball linebacker and drops him into coverage. And it's like, you're an elite pass rusher. If you're going to drop back into coverage, which is fine, do it from your jack spot so you're at least still a threat schematically. You watch consistent busted coverage. Like, can you blame Wardell Mack, who is a cornerback, looking at Jalen Kimber, Jason Marshall, anybody that steps on the field at corner, get burnt in this defense? Can you blame these kids for going, maybe not the best spot for me?
How could you even consider it? Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the most yards in the University of Florida defensive history in terms of giving up.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up again. Yeah, it is.
I've got one that's a lot worse. I'm going to go ahead and spit it out here.
Awesome, my favorite.
The only time in the history of the SEC that a quarterback's had 200 rushing and 200 passing in a game. And he smashed the record, by the way.
Yeah. Jaden Daniels was the first college football player in history to pass for 350 yards and rush for 200 in a single game. History.
Thank you, Florida Gators. You are now in the playbook or in the record book. But yeah, he makes a lot of people look bad, but there are a handful of plays, like Brian Thomas is a special player. PFF had a thing today. The highest quarterback rating when throwing to an individual receiver in the country is Brian. I mean, he looks like an NFL boundary receiver to me. I don't know about you, but he looks like one to me. And the way he runs by guys that weigh 40 pounds less than him, I'm pretty convinced of it from that plateau as well. Anyway, they still didn't tackle well, and they just don't look competent with anything they do in the second. I talked about that with a buddy of mine. I'm like, what is going on with Florida? Like, the one thing that you can always consistently get from them is they're physical, and they, like to tackle. They may get beat, but they didn't seem competent with very much of anything they did, even in the run game. What's the deal with that? Because that's what I think. If I saw it, what do you think the kid like Wardell Mack saw? You know what I mean? Like that's hard.
Yeah, like the team. I feel like it was just such a bad game. I mean, LSU had almost 12 yards per play. It was insane. They had 60 plays and 52 points, 60 plays from scrimmage and 52 points scored. It's like, what, 0.8 points per play? Like, I don't know how, if you're a defender, you look at that and you feel optimistic, which again, I will say, I think if you can clean it up a little bit, you got two great offensive teams coming up with Missouri and Florida State. If you can clean it up and look a bit more competent there, I'm not saying be good, I'm just saying be competent, then maybe you can kind of stop the bleeding a little bit, because there are, of course, rumors that you have to deal with, as always, in recruiting with guys like Nasir Johnson and guys like Amaris Williams, who you love from North Carolina.
Love.
How do you solidify those at this point where Nasir Johnson, your main competition? I mean, at least it's a school that, like, they don't develop good defensive linemen. It's only Georgia. And then Amaris Williams, you're going up against Ohio State. So how do you have this product on field and sell these players on trust the process, rather other than playing time? Because I feel like that at a certain point, it's like, yeah, I get playing time, but like, do I want to play there? Like, do I want to play on that defense with how it looks? Again, schematically, it looks like it's all out of whack at certain points this year.
The couple of things that I would say, and it depends on how Florida wants to do this, but when you're not playing up to par, you say you can be the guy to get us there. This is the old axiom. And then on the other side of it, what do I always say about what kids pick? They pick the person, not the person wearing the polo. It's not the polo in the jersey. It says Gators. He had to have liked somebody at Florida, because it's not like the Gators lit the world on fire in 2022 either. And he'd committed before this season started. So you got to remind him, hey, you're a part of the long-term process. We're not what's going on in, Athens or Tallahassee right now. And that really hurts us because those are our two rivals. But to get there, we have to get guys like you. And they would be right. At the end of the day, like Kirby Smart's a good coach, but I like Kirby's guys better than yours. And I don't care who you are. I like Kirby's guys better. That's just the way it is. So those are the two things. It's relationships and you can be the guy. That's not going to change. Florida knows that, and Billy understands that principle. I've talked to a few recruits about talking to Billy. He'll talk your ear off, but they still got to get guys in that are ready to take on the resurrection. Think of it this way. Norvell was a hair away from being canned. They went on that 3-game losing streak last year, and a lot of people were like, uh-oh, here we go. And they resurrected it. Somebody bought in. The players bought in. At some point, you just got to have a moment where you surprise everybody and you turn it around. When does that happen for Florida? Is it this year? Is it next? If it's not next year, we'll be having a different kind of conversation in November of 24. But at the same time, you got to get the recruits to do that. It's the catch-22. It never changes. We need the players, but the players are ticked because they're not good. It's a fight each direction. So we'll see how it goes. They'll win some of these. They'll lose some. But I will bet any Gator fan right now that's mad and throwing things at the TV or the screen or whatever it is they're watching this on, there's going to be a player committed to a school that right now is better than Florida. And there's a lot of those schools. So they have a lot of opportunity. And they're going to pull somebody away from one of those schools that's a pretty darn good player. And it's because it's Florida football. It's not hard to sell Florida. I tell people all the time. I said, I did not grow up a Gators fan or any schools down south. I'm from up north. But I said, if you think Florida is a hard job, you're an idiot. It is a top 5 college football job when everything is in place. It is not hard. It is State U in Florida that produces as many or more NFL players than any state. If they get things lined up, they'll be okay. But there's going to have to be some patience, which this is where the complaining starts. Florida fans have none, and they are terrible about that. So, and Brandon knows all about that. I'm sure he's had a podcast about that at some point.
So. Oh yeah. I'm just like Captain America with the shield here, just taking the hits. Because and you mentioned, it's not hard to sell Florida. Billy Napier, I'm pretty sure it was his introductory press conference. Was just like, hey man, like it's not, if you can't get 25 guys every year who want to come play football for the University of Florida, you're going to be looking for a new job soon. Like Napier is very open about it. He knows that if you can't find 25 guys every year who want to play here, then you're in for some trouble because, well, you got to be better than that. And I think that that's something where, yes, Florida Gators fans do not have much patience, but there are players that Florida's trying to pursue, whether they're committed somewhere else or not committed yet. At this point, if you're Florida, how do you get, we'll talk about Jameer Grimsley for a second because he was supposed to be on campus for the Arkansas game, ended up not going to campus, then went to Tuscaloosa instead.
Oh boy.
Trying to get him back on campus. I mean, if you can get anybody on campus for the Florida State game, now that we know it's a 7 p.m. game.
Oh, is it a night game?
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. I feel like you gotta be like, if you can get someone
it's
there,
easier. That's important.
Yeah,
because this state, I live here. It is not fun to get around. It is awful. Grimsley's 2 hours away, but some of the kids like South Florida, Pensacola, those are 4, 5, 6 hour trips in a lot of cases, depending on where you're at. So that's important. More time for them to get there on a Saturday.
Yeah, get them there Saturday, a 7 p.m. game against a rival where I'm not saying Florida is going to win at all, but I am saying that if Florida State goes in there undefeated still, you've got a chance to ruin the season for them. Like, the atmosphere is going to be crazy. So getting guys like Jameer Grimsley on campus, how important is that before National Signing Day to this point? You got one home game left, and it's that one. But then after that, of course, Florida might be playing in the SEC championship, right? But Florida, you got just that home game. You're off during the SEC championship because you are going to be home for it. Don't know about a bowl game yet, but how important is getting that official visit?
I think it's huge. And they do have an advantage. That weekend is the same that the Iron Bowl is taking place. And I'll actually be up there to see. I've never been to one. I got a chance to go, and I'm going to go check it out. They can't have him visit Tuscaloosa. He's not going to be there. I mean, nobody. They're all going to be down at Auburn. So if he doesn't go to Florida that weekend, in some ways it's good because like, okay, well, this just isn't happening. You know what I mean? This just isn't happening. Barring him having to go to a funeral or something unfortunate of that nature, like what excuse would he have? It's 2 hours from Tampa where that young man lives up there. So there you go. The bigger thing here though, and I'm just, again, this goes back to the point I made about 5 minutes ago. I'm willing to bet whoever wants, they're going to snag somebody. I'm not saying it could be A&M kid, it could be a Florida State kid, it could be a North Carolina, somebody that's committed somewhere else that you're like, oh, it's Florida. It could be Grimsley. I mean, he told me to my face right before the season that Florida was the one still recruiting him the hardest out of the schools that he picked Alabama over. Just unsolicited. I was at an event. It was a preseason high school football deal, and he just told me. And I'm like, oh, okay, good to know. I didn't think much of it then because he seemed pretty locked in and he liked Saban and all that. But if he's still talking to Florida and they're having this kind of season, it goes back to my original point. Kids pick the person, not necessarily the school. And he grew up a Florida fan. So there's at least a chance. And for the love of mankind, I will go ahead and say this on the record for the University of Florida football coaches. There is playing time available at corner right now. Oh boy. So Brandon, whatever you want to do with that, buddy, you go for it.
We're about this close to me having to suit up for them. So,
I don't think that's going to go well.
Did it go worse? What am I going to give up 700 yards to LSU? Come on. I think that should be a thing for the rest of the season. Just be like, play a fan. And a fan just comes in, rotates at corner, and that's it. Especially with Devin Moore. He got injured last week during practice.
Oh, that's right.
Concussed. We'll see if he's going to be available this week. But hey, there's cornerback time available in Florida and Gainesville, especially next season. So if you're a freshman corner and you want to play early, come on down to Gainesville. But you mentioned, God.
When does Florida play Missouri? What's the game time?
7:30 Eastern.
They didn't catch any breaks there because that's a road game, correct?
Yep.
Ouch. Okay, never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we know. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Whether that's an offensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, offensive line coach, whatever it might be. Add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring, Billy. Simple tools like screening questions makes it easier for you to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire because early signing day is right around the window. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Earlier, you mentioned Texas A&M, and I mean, just last week we talked about Texas A&M. You know, could SEC coaching firings impact?
We knew it was coming, brother.
What timing was that, by the way? Come on, just a couple days later, Jimbo wins by like 40 and gets like, it was wild. But Florida and Texas A&M, their recruiting classes have a bit of overlap because quite a few guys or quite a few Florida targets are committed to Texas A&M right now. You got Dalen Evans on the defensive line. You've got wide receiver Cam Coleman, who Florida is still pursuing. He's on campus a little while ago. You got Jordan Pride at safety. Tight end Eric Garner isn't someone that I think Florida's still pursuing, but from Illinois, Florida was in the top 4. He ended up committing to Texas A&M over them. But how does that recruiting pitch go now to Dalen Evans, where you just lost? I get it, Jamonta Waller's more edge than anything else, but you just lost a guy in that front. Jordan Pride, you can say, hey, you see our starting safeties? They're both true freshmen. The guys who rotate in are the veterans. You can come take that playing time. And I will say, there has not been a ton of improvement on the field this season, but safety has improved considerably. You look at Jordan Castell's in the running for freshman All-American this season. Bryce Thornton's taken strides. He's gotten better. So safety should be a relatively easy selling point there.
I think they're in pretty good shape, again, to get some. I wish I knew which one. Like Jordan Pride wouldn't surprise me. He's from the Panhandle. It wouldn't be a shocker. Ironically, at one point, he was committed to Florida State. There's just so many kids that they can do that with because it's easy to sell the swamp. What we're talking about right now, in a nutshell, all you got to do is look at the after, not who's expected, but who showed up to the Florida State game. Why would you? Again, it's a night game now. I mean, if they can get Dalen or somebody from Texas, that's a bone. If he comes, that's a huge sign because he's from East Texas. There's no convenient airport to where he's at. Trust me, he's in the middle of a swamp and some rose bushes. So he needs to figure out I don't know how they get out of there, but you might have to go over to Shreveport or something to fly out. But the point is still the same. Did they or did they not come? The out-of-state kids are to be a little more telling because, again, the effort. But I guarantee you, Jordan Pride's phone is ringing off the hook. I met him a month or so ago. When you walk up to him and shake his hand, you're like, that's a safety? And he's in high school? Okay. So they're in better shape than people think. If they can just, let's say they get beat 27-17 against Florida State, I think that's an applicable final score. Gator fans would probably take that right now, I think, because they gave up less than 50.
If you think they're only scoring 27.
I know.
Keon Coleman might just every single play just go up on top.
He only had 20-some yards against Miami. They didn't even have their two corners. It was wild. But here's the deal. You're just one weekend away from flipping it around, just like you did this past summer. I know there are Gator fans walking the plank, and they're doing it of their own free will right now. I'm telling you. Yeah. Brandon's like, see you later. Deuces.
Yeah, deuces. I'll be here.
But I'm telling you, I don't think it's that hard to sell. I really don't. So, sue me. But any of the schools in Florida, I always get guys that are fans of any one of the three. And they'll say, oh, that school's done. And I just start laughing. I'm like, shut your freaking pie hole. Any of the major programs.
That's how it goes. Every school I hate is dead. That's it. Once a little thing happens, they're done. Mike Norvell lost to Jacksonville State. He was cooked. No chance.
How's that working out? They're number 4 in the country. Yeah, it's just look, man, college football is super volatile. It is super volatile.
Success ain't linear. Wins aren't linear. That is, you suck and then go right up. And so, that's how things go there. But there's two more players I wanted to ask about just generally. Jordan Seaton, offensive tackle, IMG Academy, Florida, pursuing him heavily, and they will continue to do so until he signs somewhere else. And Zay Mincy, we'll say DB, because depending on where you look, he's probably going to play corner for Florida. That's what they've been recruiting him as. That's what they've been talking to him as. What does Florida have to do to lock them in? And even on top of that, because yes, we could talk about Nasir Johnson maybe flipping, Amaris Williams maybe flipping. If you can get guys like Jordan Seaton or like Zay Mincy in your class, just how far does that go as far as maybe simmering Florida Gators fans are like, it's cooked, it's over, whatever crap they want to cry about?
It'll work for about 10 minutes. Florida fans like to bitch. And I think Florida fans, well, you're one of those, yes. But I think you're my own.
You kidding me? I'd love to.
I need to check your Twitter more often during a Florida game. That is my own fault.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. That's iffy. But here's the deal. Florida fans that are my age or even a little bit younger have went through the Spurrier era and the Meyer era. Here's reality. Everything is like this in college football, up and down. Even if you're Florida. And again, I think it's a top 5 job in the country. But at the same time, it's really easy to hire a bad coach as compared to hire a good one. It's just true. I mean, even when Florida took Urban, I mean, I knew him pretty well. They didn't know. what he was going to do. He'd been at freaking Bowling Green in Utah. I knew him when he was at Notre Dame. I visited him when he was at Bowling Green. I used to talk to him a little bit. He was at Utah. He didn't know. I mean, he'd never been the head coach. There's always risk. A lot of people wanted Napier. He still may work out. And then again, maybe he will crash and burn. But eventually Florida's going to rise back up. Just take a chill pill, relax, maybe, go for a jog once in a while if you're a Florida fan, work some of the stress off. Don't yell at Brandon's podcast quite as often as you do. It'll be all right.
So that one ain't changing.
But they're going to look, those two kids, like you just mentioned, they've got a chance at both. I mean, Mincy in particular, I think I feel pretty good about him going to Florida. So
yeah, that's one where
that could change because he is a Florida kid. I mean, the state of Florida is volatile, but they've done a really good job recruiting.
Okay, real quick, what's more volatile, the state of Florida or college football success?
State of Florida.
There we go. That's how you know. It's crazy down there. That's why they got the little Florida Man articles. That's
I live right in the middle of it. I live 10 minutes from I-4, man. This area it doesn't matter where you go. The recruiting, it is week to week at best. You're constantly at zero commitments, even though you have 20 of them. That's the state of Florida.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian. This is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, and unfortunately, the host of Locked On Seminoles. Catch him every week on Locked On Gators, every day with Locked On Seminoles. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football, depth chart, Hayden Hansen, Wednesday. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33, and I will see you all tomorrow.